What we have done over the years is develop what we call summary of findings tables. Obviously, the topic of today's presentation. This work started about 12 years ago as a collaboration of the GREAT Working Group and the Cochrane collaboration. And essentially, summary of findings tables are providing a brief synthesis in a tabular format of the key findings of the systematic review. We consider them the final product of a systematic review, and there's actually randomized controlled trial evidence that shows us that summary of findings tables help with the accessibility, speed, and understanding of the information from a systematic review. They are largely composed of three broader categories of information: the relative estimate of an effect when we talk about interventions, the absolute estimate of the effect, and the certainty that we can have using a GREAT rating of the certainty. Altogether, there are 7 elements of a summary of findings tables. A summary of findings table should list all of the important outcomes, that is, the outcomes that are relevant for decision making, a measure of the risk of in the intervention group, or a measure of the difference, ideally both, a measure of the control group or the estimated risk in a typical population. I mentioned the relative magnitude of the effect. And then the number of participants in studies addressing relevant outcomes, because that may obviously differ for a systematic review with regards to what information is available for an individual outcome. And then a rating of the overall certainty of the evidence. And this is just a quick reminder of what Juan just talked about. We use the terms certainty and quality of the evidence or confidence in the estimates of the effect interchangeably, so don't get confused. From now on, we will mostly refer to certainty of the evidence, and then finally comments. This work has actually been done in quite some detail. Many of you will be familiar with but not all of them. We will provide a list of references, but there have been, first of all, numerous studies evaluating how to improve summary of findings tables because they are considered to be so important. They are described in the Cochrane handbook in the previous chapters 11 and 12. In the new handbook version, they will be in different chapters. As I said, in key publications, as well as in GREAT Pro, the software to produce some summary of findings tables properly. So I'll talk about the elements of the summary of findings table, in particular for those who are less familiar with it. So first of all, there's I will just use the cursor here. There's a question on top, basically our PICO question that is described, where the outcomes are listed here as the final part of the PICO question are listed here in rows. And this is a review that dealt with interventions for infants who were at risk of allergies, and one of the outcomes here was the occurrence of asthma or adverse effects from the intervention, which in this case was probiotics. The next column shows you the anticipated absolute effects, and once again, there are different formats. This is the original format of a summary of findings table, which since has changed given randomized trials that we have done, but this is the original format to give you all of that background. Here you see the risks in the intervention group and in the comparison group expressed in natural frequencies. And obviously, in this case, in the old format, you have to calculate the difference between those two, the absolute effect yourself, as 5 per 1,000. Okay, so the next is the relative estimate of the effect, relative risk in this case, 1.04 and 1.27 for the two outcomes, followed by the number of participants per studies and the number of studies, as well as then the certainty of the evidence rating. And Juan took you through, just in a nutshell, the rating according to GREAT, assuming that most of you are familiar with it, and then finally a comment section. Just as a second format, sorry, As a second format, the alternative formats that are acceptable and that have been tested are just quickly shown here. The later formats focus more on a risk difference. In other words, it makes it easier to understand how to assess the estimate of the effect in absolute terms, different order of the column, but largely the same type of information, including here explanations both about the rating of the certainty of the evidence, as well as any explanations that are necessary to understand the actual rating. Here yet another format that is widely used. Once again, so there's all of these formats have been shown to be effective. The most effective ones are the ones that directly indicate two things. One is the risk difference here expressed in percentages, as well as giving a clear explanation of what the reasons for rating down or up are. And once again, so that's available in GradePro, the grade software, where we also have some interactive summary of findings tables available that can be directly derived and used as a static link to be linked to your Cochrane systematic review.